Hi, Peter Hutton here. In this episode, I've got a story to tell you, and unlike a lot of stories that you'll hear from a real estate agent, and that is a success story, I'm going to tell you a failure story, one that I learned a lot from, and the people that I was working for, my clients, I think they learned from it as well. But here it is. So I listed a property and I had appraised the property at $1.4 million. Actually, in my normal way that I appraise and to give a realistic price, we look at worst case scenarios, likely case and best case. And the best case scenario was around the $1.4 million mark, but 1.4 was really at the top end. And there was a lot of evidence to say that that's what the property was worth. So it was on paper, there was lots of evidence. The owners had a contrary view of it, and I'm always open-minded to price because you just don't know. Similar properties often don't sell for similar prices, and I talk about that in my book, The Love Price. So I add on their side, and their idea of price was between that 1.6 and 1.7 mark. Now, we had it on the market for 2 weeks. It was presented beautifully for sale, as best really you could for that property in the condition that it was in. It was really presented beautifully well, and we did all the right marketing. We had buyers come through, and within 2 weeks we had an offer of $1.4 million. Now, the buyer was adamant that was her top price. I always think we should test an offer, and just because a buyer says that's my top price doesn't mean that that's true. In most cases it's not true. In this particular case, the owners came back with a counter offer that was up around the 1.6 mark, and it completely frightened the buyer away, and that buyer disappeared. The buyer thought, and this is what they said to me, the buyer thought that at 1.6, the vendors weren't likely to come down to anywhere near their price of 1.4, so there was no point. They lost hope and they went elsewhere. We stayed on the market, we had more interest on the property, but it never quite got to that 1.4. In those first 2 weeks is crucial. You often get your best buyer at that point in time. And the other thing too is the forces against that usually come from the owner, because their expectations are at the highest point early on in a marketing campaign, and their expectation, as I said, was north of $1.6 million. There's an interesting thing about ownership. When you own a property, when you own anything, psychologically you value it more because of that ownership. If you don't own something, you never value it as high as owning it. And there's been a lot of research on this, and over the 20-something years I've been in real estate, it's just the case that ownership causes us to have a different relationship with that thing, and usually it's a much higher price point. Unfortunately, that 2 weeks wasn't enough time for the sellers in this particular instance to see reason in price and see the value in that 1.4. Months went by, we couldn't find that 1.4 buyer again, and the vendors decided to go with another agent. I said to them, you can get 1.4 again, but you're going to spend a lot more money now to build momentum with another agent, which they did. Quite a few $1,000s, and they ended up selling it for under $1.4 million, and that was a shame. It was a lesson for them, and it was a lesson for me. The big lesson for me is really being courageous and brave to tell your clients the truth of the situation, and really share with them what's going on and why that they're getting stuck. So that was a lesson for me, and hopefully something you can take from it. So until next time, and if you'd like to talk price with me and get an appraisal on your property, I'd love to give you a realistic appraisal that will give you a good, fair starting point for the sale of your property. Give me a call.